hilarious. Things like, why did
Yeah,
the
no, it was
banana go to the doctor?
definitely the right key.
And the
Why?
punchline is, it's something like, because he got his like finger lopped off by a knife. That's like the punchline that
Makes
he
sense to
delivered.
me.
And it's funny. I mean, everyone laughs, so it's sort of hard not to call it funny.
It's because he lives in a country with socialized medicine, so he can just go to the doctor without having to worry about it. It's actually
That's right.
commentary.
That's right. Yeah, he's a very advanced 3-year-old. He's
It's-
pretty deep.
I love it.
Yeah.
Is it working? Oh, I just got a notification.
What's up with the
finally.
gods? Tell me about what's happening in the gods world.
The
Oh,
shitty
God's
thing
world?
is,
Here
like,
know about
I
gods?
can't
Oh
like
my God,
name
please.
I
it.
can't. I mean, I can't shill. I can't shill
I'm
my
not asking you to
pyramids.
shill.
Twist my arm.
Yeah, I go in and.
I have to like,
Hold on.
I have to like go in and rename it.
You gotta see
and-
my
That's what I did.
Halloween costume
Yeah.
this year.
Oh, look at that. What's
Oh,
the
yeah.
name of that one?
I'm doing the description if you want to switch the
obnoxious.
title.
Me.
Right
Yeah, I
now.
mean, you got the.
HNT live with.
That is a great Halloween costume.
You
It was
got
supposed to be much
a thing I
larger,
could
but
let
that
you
was too
at?
much effort.
What'd you say?
All right, it's 12:03.
You got a thumbnail.
Is that all
No,
you
I
did?
don't. Can you make one real quick?
Don't judge me.
I was outside. HNT.
It's all right.
I don't usually wear a costume at all now.
That's
that
what I was
Yeah,
gonna try to
please.
talk to you about yesterday. Is making a thumbnail for
Now
this
that you're
ahead of
dressing your
time.
children.
Not
For
cool.
Halloween.
Yeah, totally.
Safe moon on it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's because it's live.
Seriously,
from,
that
like,
was
the
all
one
the
before.
dad jokes
That's
that
what
we
I'm saying.
had?
I don't
The
get to
fun
because I'm
jokes that we
like,
had?
I don't know,
Terrible.
because
That's
of the way
That's
OBS
it. What do you
is.
got for us, Abai?
I don't get to choose like
I
the
don't know.
title description or
Oh,
any
I
of
heard
that
a good
stuff
one
before
recently.
going live. It just goes live with the last
Why
thing.
can't you trust up and why
What are
can't
you
you trust
using?
an Adam?
You could do it inside the
Why?
software.
Because they make up everything.
Well, I'm editing
That
on
is really good.
YouTube right now, anyways. So it's
That's
Thank
that's
you.
good.
live Zoom
With
meeting.
That's
that,
high quality.
What are they
That will
covering?
be our cleanser
What are they gonna be
to
covering?
begin the meeting and start
It's
the
monthly
process.
meeting.
Thank you, Abai.
I mean,
Okay.
I think that alone is going to increase the NPS score of this community call.
It was a total failure before, and now we're like, I
Now
give it
we're
an
in.
11 out of 10.
Let's kick this off. Let's do it.
Great. Okay. I am beginning my moderator pre-flight checklist. My name is Jamie Wilkinson from the Decentralized Wireless Alliance, aka the
What are you
DeWi.
using for
You can pronounce it
streaming
however you'd
software?
like, though. We're
I'm
fine with
adding more to
whatever.
the description.
Just talk about us. I have activated Zoom auto captions for accessibility. I am now warning everybody that this meeting will be recorded. You will be warned again by my good friend, Zoom Robot. I love that so much. Video recording's begun. Call for additional agenda items. We're quite full this week, so I'm sorry it'll have to go for next month. Question or news. We never really use this news announcement section, but please feel free to shill your pyramids here or other wares, announcements about your company, new products. You know, I don't know what the line is, but we'll know it when we see it and we'll discuss it on the next call. So please feel free to throw things in with the suggestions. We'll try to approve them as we come in. If you're, you feel free to use the attendee list. We might have to undo this. It might be the last time we do this, filling out the attendee list in real time because we've had to kind of close the edits because there's too many people on this call. But please try to get one in, we'll approve them. And lastly, we always ask people to turn on their video if you are willing and able, just since we're all just usernames in a big Discord server, and it's nice to remember that we're all people too. So thank you for polite conversation and respectful hand waving as necessary, and keep it clean, and welcome to, I was gonna say November's Helium Community Call technically, but we rescheduled. So it's still November's Helium DeWi Community Call, but it's
All right, I just
on
finished up
December
the
1st. Up this week first,
title,
can I hand it over to
description.
Scott, Mr. Scott Siegel
Are you
with
making
some
what's it called, or
DeWi
should I make one?
updates?
Try to make one real quick.
Sure. Thank you, Jamie. All right. So the first one, many of you know him, love him. I am thrilled to share that Joey Hiller is joining the DeWi team effective today as our new technical program manager. So hooray and welcome to Joey. Joey's going to be covering on a whole bunch of areas I'm going to keep throwing on this plate, helping to shepherd things around HIPS, working on the foundation roadmap, thinking about how we're scaling infrastructure, obviously working closely with the Helium team on that. Going to continue to work closely with grant projects, Mappers initiative that I know is near and dear to his heart, other things. But Joey, anything I'd say, most people here already know you, but if you want to do kind of a quick intro to some of the newer folks that don't know you as well.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, sure, a lot of folks know me from Helium. I've been around for a solid 2 years at this point, since late 2019. Outside of Helium, I've done a bunch of stuff. I work in the Bay Area doing product stuff at a variety of tech companies. So I've done everything from creating visualizations of US case law, which wrap your head around that one for a second, to building marketing software and tools for content creators, all sorts of stuff like that. Most recently, I'm coming out of a role where I was the lead product designer, and I was doing that for about 3.5 years, and then started sort of gradually just really getting overly interested in Helium to the point where it made sense for me to make the jump. So I'm really excited to be getting really deep into everything related to the network, everything from blockchain to sensor deployments and all in between. So I'll be excited to work with a lot more folks a lot more closely.
Awesome. And so very, very happy to have you finally joining full time. Really excited about that. We are finalizing a couple other hires that I will very soon be able to announce on grant management, ecosystem development, but overall foundation team continues to grow and expand. I am really excited about the new folks that are coming in. As always, more to come on this soon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott, and welcome, Joey. I could not be more thrilled about this. Up next, I'm not screen sharing, but up next is Jeremy with a quick update from the MOC, the Manufacturing Oversight Committee, and then after that, Joey is coming back to talk about the Grants Committee.
Oh shoot! I actually am traveling right now. I can't quite give the update.
No problem. No problem.
Empowered.
It's my mistake. I just follow my agenda. We can skip it. Absolutely, come back to it. Just share it in writing. Whatever's convenient. I don't know. I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
Sorry, the date of the meeting caught me a little off surprise here.
Yeah, things are crazy out there. Joey, do you still have a grants committee update for us? We just move right along.
Sure. Yeah, just a real quick one. I wanted to call out that we now have 7 accepted grants. So folks are busy working on doing everything from documentation to tutorials to secure concentrators and new block explorers. So a huge variety of stuff that's going on there. We currently have 16 total in the pipeline. So everything else that's not accepted is currently in review. So we're sort of working through that. It's a whole lot on the grants committee to sit down and really digest these things. I highly encourage folks to go check out the current grants, both accepted and outstanding. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. Yeah, that's it. I can't keep my update short.
It's fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, great.
Yeah, dropping a link too. There it is.
That's great. Yeah, I think most people actually really catch up with this asynchronously, so I think the write-ups are always appreciated. Thank you, Joey. Oh, and a special shout out to Christina, who is our volunteer note taker this week. I would like to thank the note takers profusely. So thank you, Christina. Up next, Abai, I put 2 of your slots together with Doom block tails, which I'm looking forward to. And then I gave you a slot for HIP 44 to the witness decay rate proposal that you didn't get to talk about last time. In case you'd like to, feel free to do it however you'd like.
Sounds great. Doom block tails. Yeah, it's been the network has been through some stuff over the last couple of weeks. I think so we published the postmortem yesterday. I'm actually glad that we published it yesterday, so maybe folks have had a chance to read it. And if not, that's all good. Happy to also talk through bits of it. But ultimately, like the last week and a half or so, or week or so, had 3 outages, all kind of related to each other. The first one was really if folks aren't aware, there's sort of there's one component on the network that's, the router. And this is the thing that sort of buys packets on the network. All of us are creating coverage with our hotspots. And then, someone on the network has to be there to actually purchase the packets that are being transmitted. And so, what happened here was that we had a router that essentially failed due to a bug that we hadn't seen before. And what it created was just a flood of dispute transactions. And what that did was it just created an enormous block that validators couldn't agree upon, and then couldn't, even if we had if they did end up agreeing on them, they're very unlikely that hotspots would have been able to consume them, and other validators even would have been able to consume them, depending on their setups. So we had this kind of showstopper issue. What's kind of interesting about this kind of outage is that although that router was faulty, all of the other routers actually stayed up. Which means that data transfer continued to happen, even though, and this is the sort of the nature of the design of our blockchain, which is, data transfer and the sort of management of that data transfer happens as a layer 2 function. It's an application that's built on
It
top.
gave me
So,
an error that I
those other
couldn't,
routers and other
change
packet
it.
purchasers were able to continue operating at least until they reached the point where they ran out of data credits or their state channels expired. And so that's really something that a router operator or packet purchaser operator can configure on their side. And it's really just a matter of, what kind of user experience do they want to offer? How long do they want to be kind of off chain, or on the side chain? And how many data credits are they willing to put into the state channel when they open it? And ultimately, when the state channel closes is when, hotspots that transfer data get paid. And so this is also like a user experience question for them with the hotspots that are providing them coverage. So that's sort of the first outage. The second outage was a similar issue as the first one. We made I think in the span of 24 to 36 hours, we had essentially the equivalent of an entire performance week, which was really incredible. Like, we had a lot of support from, folks in the community. Essentially, validators were upgrading. I think we had 4 or 5 different upgrades that validators did, in the span of 12 hours that we sort of asked them to. And so that there was a lot of change in just a very short amount of time. It still hit another sort of very large block with that second one, and that ultimately required us to do a rescue block to sort of restart block production. We haven't done a lot of rescue blocks in the history of the network. I think this is now our 4th, if I remember correctly. And ultimately, at that point, that was the only real way to sort of get things moving again. Again, another one of those situations where packet transfer actually continued to work, which is great, for at least for the period of time that they were able to. It was a much shorter outage. And then the third one was related to that rescue block. There was a bug in the rescue block code, and sort of causing this like nonce disagreement. The idea nonces are essentially, a way to prevent replay attacks on networks, and there was sort of a disagreement in that, and that sort of caused the third outage. So they're all 3 were related to each other. They all, ultimately came from, a scaling issue. And as much as this was an awful outage, like, there's no question, I'm in a weird way glad it happened this early in the network. Although that sounds very odd to say that. It's better now than when there's 5 million user handsets that are trying to make phone calls or access the internet. Better than 1 billion devices on the network. So that's in a weird way glad that we saw this, that we addressed this. Really thankful for the community for responding as fast as they did. And I think we'll get through this. This is just going to be kind of a bump in the road, 10 years from now.
That's great. Would you be willing to take a couple questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
If there are, I don't see any hands raised, but if you have a question, feel free to chime in. nothing offhand, so I'll just ask how
Oh,
like.
Jamie, looks like there's one here.
Oh.
FL Cap trying to
Oh.
wave.
Thank you. Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I know you guys are, can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
I'm well away, just working 24 hours around the clock trying to get this done. New to the community, sadly started, a month ago when everything sort of went off the cliff. I just, even now you're talking about how things are fixed, but I mean, my miner hasn't got anything in 18 hours. Even before that, it missed 6 or 7 rewards that I didn't get. And how, there's, you look on the announcements and everything, and it's, oh yeah, everything's back to fine, just sit and wait. We've got, I know you were busy, you had 80,000 new units or whatever it was, but again, you're talking about a network that's supposed to be holding billions of devices. How can we be, what if there wasn't a chip shortage and everybody was going? I don't understand how everything was so underscaled that it couldn't handle 80 devices and you had to shut a blockchain down. I don't understand how it's, like I said, I'm 18 hours with everything in sync, everything testing fine, and just sit back and wait and hope for the best. I don't understand how we can expect to have a billion devices on this. That's all. It's just very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the frustration, certainly, 18 hours, or any amount of time, right? Like it's, if you have certain expectations of, performance and, you're not meeting those performance expectations, I understand that is, that is frustrating. I think that, as far as, have we solved all the bugs? The answer is no. Like there's no, like, this is fundamentally software. This is written by, and it's an open source project, and we welcome help, right? Like, and I think ultimately there's many folks in the community that are helping, and there are like looking to continue to improve the network, and we welcome it. Like I think the entire community welcomes it. So that's one. Two, the software isn't done, right? Like there's none of this stuff is done, and I think the amount of scale that we've seen
Yeah, Skinny
in
Gorilla,
the
no
last
problem.
2 years is even you mentioned like what if there wasn't a chip shortage, and what if there were 1 million hotspots on the network today? I think we would have seen all of these issues a year ago, right? And it would have been just like reaching these scaling milestones this quickly is something that's unprecedented. I think the way that I think about it is that like there are two kind of ways to build products. One is to sort of do all the work and finish it and say it's done, and then ship it, and then say that we're never going to change anything. But that sort of requires everything to be done already, and sort of a lot of these that's sort of one approach. Certainly the other approach is to build something and iterate, right? And then there's no question that the network was still operating for the purposes that it's for, which is for data transfer, for quite a bit of time. And so I think that's maybe something worth highlighting, right? And I think that's something that we should try to figure out how to make that even better as well. How does a hotspot continue to provide access to these sensors even when the chain might not be available? And maybe leads that to another point that you made, which is around stopping the chain. To be very clear, like no individual stopped the chain here, right? This is a decentralized network, which means that there are validators that are producing blocks, and those validators weren't able to come into consensus and produce a new block, right? So no individual validator stopped the chain, no individual software engineer stopped the chain, and no individual community member stopped the chain. So that's maybe also important to note.
Thank you. Bye. Chris, you had a question as well.
Right. I'd just like to ask, could you give a bit of a layman's explanation? As I understand it, we had a storm of state channel closed transactions related to the disco mode router. And that's just one subunit that is, I suppose, processing transactions from certain hotspots that are trying to use disco mode, or certain apps that are trying to use that. Could you just give an idea the scale of state channel closed transactions we would expect to have if there are 1 billion devices on the network, and how that doesn't threaten the same sort of issue with these huge blocks that we're seeing here?
No, that's a good question. You know, the reason for that sort of reason why there was just a massive spike in them is because of disputes. And so when a hotspot doesn't get when a state channel closes and a hotspot doesn't get paid for data transfer that it thinks that it is responsible for, or sorry, it's a hotspot thinks that it didn't get paid for something that it should have been. It files a dispute, and then the state channel kind of decides, or the state channel operator decides, and this is all automatic, by the way, that it needs to sort of do a bunch of additional closes. And so it's really because of those disputes that it happened. There was no limit to the actual before this outage. There was no limit to the block size that could have been proposed, or even the sort of size of a transaction of that particular transaction in a single block. And so those are the kinds of things that we fixed, right? And that's definitely a bug that we needed to resolve. And so a faulty router shouldn't take down the network, right? That's for sure. And ultimately that's what happened, and we have the protection now to prevent that from happening again. So blocks are going to be smaller, and they have this sort of very hard limit on size now, and so those kinds of disputes, if they start to spike for some other reason, they'll just kind of get backed up in the network while other transactions continue to flow and other blocks continue to flow.
We got time for one more question on Doom block, if anybody else has one. I'll take that as a no, but thank you very much for folks chiming in. Abai, thank you very much for coming on here too to face the firing squad.
It's all good. No, I mean, this is important stuff. And like, for anyone who's getting, who is concerned about this issue, I don't think it's completely reasonable. Like we're so early in this network, and this is the time to make sure that we do this right. And I'm glad that it's being brought up.
It's great, thank you. And then no pressure, but I slotted you in for the HIP44 witness decay rate discussion as well, if you wanted to talk through that.
Yeah, do you want to screen share? Actually, I can't on my.
Sure, yeah, I'll bring it up for you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll give just a quick history here. So this particular proposal actually came out of a series of discussions in the POC discussion channel, and was something that we knew that we could probably implement, and so we did, but did it in a way that is intentionally not active, because we believe that this should probably go through some kind of through a governance procedure, which is why we sort of also proposed the HIP along with it. Essentially, there's sort of two sides of proof of coverage. One is what is it for? Let's start really quick background for folks that are newer to the community. Proof of coverage is the incentive model. It's the sort of way to, in a way, it's a solution to this like bootstrap problem, or the chicken and egg problem when you're building networks or building marketplaces, where if a user wants to use a network, they want to know that there's coverage, but if someone who's putting up coverage wants to know that there's an incentive for them to do so. And so that's why proof of coverage is a way to essentially the sort of reward side of it is to reward that, but really what it's also doing is that it's validating asserted locations, right? Anyone can assert a location on the network. It costs a certain amount to the network to do that. It's paid to the network, and not to any individuals on the network, but it's just sort of burned to the network. The sort of why that's valuable is that now a potential user can know that there is actually coverage where a hotspot says it is. We've also, in the last several months, we've definitely seen folks finding ways to arbitrage this, and it makes sense. If you were looking at this purely from a economic incentive perspective, people will arbitrage the thing that is the most valuable, and then on the network today, the most valuable reward is a witness reward. So we've met a lot of folks in the community have noticed that there are actors on the network that kind of are overstating their witnesses, potentially by software, using software, or potentially even using hardware to sort of bypass things that are happening on the network. So the proposal, so there were a couple of proposals. Some were sort of hard caps. I think HIP 42. What's the ratio one that Anthony put together? Was sort of a hard cap based on the number of beacons that you have, and sort of have a sort of a ratio between the witness and the beacon rate. This was a sort of more soft cap, and again, it's an economic. It's sort of an economic approach to reduce within an epoch, so it's only 30 blocks. Tell folks that are sort of deploying things on the network that you can absolutely witness as much as you want, but once you reach a certain threshold, which is you could some could argue it's like let's keep the number of transactions on the network fewer. Another could argue that it's like maybe it's too much data. That's really we don't really need that data that frequently. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, but like ultimately it's a sort of economic incentive not to over witness. And now, I think the obvious and first question is like, well, what if I put a really great tower with a sector antenna, and I have the potential of witnessing a lot? Like, will the network push back on me, and will the network tell me that I shouldn't put that kind of investment in? And I think the thing that's missing from this HIP, by the way, and I think that's something that we have work to do here, is to actually show like hotspots that would actually be affected by this kind of scaling. With like kind of anecdotal analysis that I've done and sort of put into this HIP, but we'll get a little more specific and actually have a tool that allows people to actually put in their hotspot name and see how they could have been affected if this was active over some number of blocks. I found that the anecdotal analysis that I've done is like I found that this doesn't actually affect a whole lot of hotspots. There is sort of a very, very noisy tail, and that noisy tail is probably the ones that are that also seem to be doing things that are odd on the network, and they're the ones that were sort of identified by the community as potentially doing something odd. So I think this is maybe a good venue just to sort of mention that this exists, but there's also a Discord channel. There's been a lot of discussion around it already in the Discord channel and also in the POC discussion channel. But I think, the one thing that I would ask the community would be to sort of wait for we're not going to make any changes or propose that even this is put up for a vote until we have that kind of analysis that's more rigorous around like who would actually be affected by this.
Thank you, Abai. Any questions for Abai on HIP 44, witness decay, reward decay? I'll take that as a no. There's been, oh, I'm sorry, we have one. Please go ahead.
Hey.
You're too fast on the nose.
Oh, yeah,
man.
Arjun. Oh, I haven't read the HIP yet, so forgive me if I ask a stupid question here. But in the future, could you not couple witnesses or witness count in terms of limiting witness count to something else that's kind of intrinsically important to the network, like data transfer or something like that, where somebody who is gaming wouldn't have as much data transfer for whatever reason? And maybe that's a bad example, but something else, kind of couple two elements together to actually determine what a cap should be, as opposed to making it arbitrary.
I was with you all the way to arbitrary. I think I think
well, I mean, like a hard cap or a hard number. I mean,
Sure.
I guess you could. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think scaling it based on actual like what's valuable to the network, which is data transfer, I think makes a lot of like I think there's a lot of there's a lot of good there. You know, in fact, one of the things I like about HIP 37, which is the Omni Protocol POC HIP, is that it actually scales the buckets of POC rewards to the amount of data transfer that happens within each one of those protocols. And I think that's like really special. That's like my favorite part of that design, which is that like if there is if this network is going to be something that's used by multiple protocols, we should scale the sort of bootstrap incentive to the protocols that are, you know, being actually used, right? So, you know, let's use something that's not being considered, right? So Apple has their ultra wideband protocol. That's what, you know, you use to locate their sort of locator protocol that is that they sort of adapted for AirTags and for for like AirPod Pros and things like that. If we wanted to incentivize the build out of an Apple ultra wideband network, it should the sort of incentive of it, the bootstrap incentive should be scaled to the actual devices using it, right? And I actually think that's a pretty powerful idea, because that will make sure that the protocol that's being used the most is also the one that's being incentivized the most to build out. There's a sort of negative incentive there as well, right? Because only things that are known would sort of get in, you know, so potentially like completely novel networks may not form because of that. So I think there's probably something that we need to figure out with that. But, you know, I like this idea of, you know, scaling it based on actual usage. So in general, I think there's something good there.
We have one more question from Akita, and I apologize if I'm mangling your name. Please correct me.
Hello, hi everybody. Yeah, you pronounced the name correctly, but something what's happened with the account of Zoom, because this is my wife's account. I clicked on the invitation, so so I was in with this account. However, I'd like to know something about the 5G. I'm really interested in Europe. I'm from Europe. And I'd like to know what are the expectations. This is my first question. I mean, when it is expected to come here. And the second question is about the rewards. Are we going to see the rewards in the same Explorer, or how is that going to work?
This call is generally not kind of like an open discussion forum for questions, but coincidentally, the next subject is about HIP 37, which is related to 5G. So potentially, I'll leave to that speaker to discuss.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions on the topic of the witness decay rate before we move along? No, thank you. Bye. I'm sure there's been some good conversation in the Discord channel as well. So please always take it there, or GitHub if you have further comments or questions.
Thanks, everyone.
And then up next, I do not have my handy dandy agenda in front of me. Do we have post Ben J on the call?
Yeah, hey guys, that's me.
Hi, and welcome.
Hey everyone.
Welcome.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
please. Yeah, to introduce the topic, it is listed as status update for HIP 37, which is the Omni Protocol POC proposal. So please, Ben, take it away.
Right, thanks a lot, Jamie. So to address the last speaker, unfortunately, I'm probably going to disappoint a little bit here because I don't really have much to talk to directly about HIP 37, except for to ask the community what the status is. That's something that's very interesting to us in what we're trying to do. I agree that there's a lot of excitement around being able to use Omni protocols, particularly for my business, 5G. So we're working towards that end, and I guess I'm just wondering, where is the status of that HIP? What can we do to push this along? And just open up the discussion on what's going on, what's the general traffic around that currently?
Oh, it's a great question. Yeah, and then actually, I know folks from FreedomFi have kind of prompted the same thing, and there's been plenty of discussion around it. I don't know if we have anybody.
I think Boris is here. Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, I'd love to throw the floor to Boris. If you, yeah, not to put more people on the spot, but yeah, if you're willing, field some questions.
So in a nutshell, the status is that we need to put it up to a vote. And we've been chatting with DeWi and the DeWi on actually doing that. I mean, I think from our side, everything's ready to actually get folks to vote on it. We have started some preliminary work on the witnessing app side in particular. But before we go very far, I think it's important to get kind of this formalized. So so to the extent that we can get DeWi assistance to move that to the next step, I think that we can progress this forward.
Yeah, I will gladly take this ball back from you, Boris. Yeah, it's actually a topic we discussed a little bit last month around sort of Helium vote. And then actually since then we've had the redenomination vote, which we don't have an agenda item here to sort of talk about that, but if there's time at the end, I'd be very curious to discuss how we move forward with it. With 37 specifically, I'm not totally up to speed on where it is in terms of like code completion versus sort of conceptual completion, which is one of the sort of delineations we talked about last time for like a temperature check vote versus like a full vote. And I caveat all this too with like very much that this is like a work in progress, something that we're all trying to sort of collectively figure out like what votes are required when per se, particularly with something like this, which has a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I mean, as far as
yeah, go ahead. Bye. Yeah, I'm just
sorry. I would say that like, we're probably at a stage where a temperature check vote makes sense, right? Like I think the discussion has been going for a while, and I think I would probably argue that there's wide support. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. But I feel like there likely is wide support. I think there's a lot of software to be written. I know that the Freedom Fi team is already working on it on the witnessing app side. I think there's a lot of software to be written on the core side. And that really comes down to, when and whether or not there's a team to work on it. And so I think, temperature check vote seems completely reasonable, Jamie.
I totally agree. I mean, as evidenced by this question being on the agenda to surprise Boris, obviously people love 5G. As I have a phone, I love 5G. I suppose there's a contingent of people who dislike 5G, but they're probably not on this call. Yeah, that sounds great. I would love to set that up. Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll coordinate with Joey. You need anything to do? Let's help set up votes.
Well, I think the other point that was brought up, which is like, what's next, right? And I think, Boris, maybe you can give like a quick update to the community. Sorry to put you on the spot about like the witnessing app and, like kind of what, at least more like intent rather than update. And then, I think we can talk about like what kinds of things are needed on the chain as well, right? Because I think there'll be a bunch of things that are needed on the chain.
Sure. So let me maybe try and qualify this question a little bit, because what's next when it comes to 5G is the kind of topic that can easily take the rest of this meeting. Do we want to talk about what's next when it comes to specifically HIP 37, or you want
we should talk about that.
So I think that as far as the kind of a broad level kind of technical definition of what needs to be written for HIP 37, it's already there. I completely agree with the temperature check vote in that it is somewhat of a complicated HIP and that it touches a number of, fairly sophisticated areas related to updating the economics of the whole chain, which is what Abai has mentioned around the Omni protocol shift and changing the reward buckets based on the amount of data pushed by each particular protocol, as well as a fairly non-trivial amount of work on the front end of it related to actually building the witnessing app and doing all of the work related to proper reconciliation between the like 5G data usage and the way to account for it on the blockchain. As far as how I see the broad like next steps, we started kind of playing around and POCing stuff on the app side a little bit. I think we need to do a vote following that, probably between us, by your team and whoever else is interested in participating. We need to figure out how we split the work in terms of milestones. And the two general areas are, there's like a blockchain economic side of work, and there is a front end like 5G core side of work. So I presume that the former will need a lot of help on the Helium side, whereas we ourselves will take most of the load on the front end. And following that, we probably need to launch that on the test net, and let it sit there for a little while and make sure that the whole thing works. And after that, we can push it to the main net. On the positive note is that when it comes to 5G, we do have, as most of you have seen, a couple of roaming partners that are chomping at the bit to get started. One is the small MVNO that we've announced earlier, which is GigSky, whom we've also discussed about potentially adopting the witnessing SDK as part of their eSIM app. And I think that they're willing to entertain that. The second one, as you guys have seen, is the bigger Dish and all of the MVNOs that are under their umbrella. So we will have the initial sort of necessary minimum pool of data to create, at least some reward bucket for 5G, to be able to actually, kind of bootstrap this whole thing from zero. So this is kind of a little bit all over the place update. I don't know if that's aligned
Fantastic.
with what you guys
Fantastic.
wanted to hear. But I can keep going for another, 30 minutes. But so, yeah.
Ben, how are you feeling about all of our updates here?
I think the updates are great. Thanks for providing all that info, Boris. I very much would like to move this forward and participate in that. So whatever that takes, I'll keep an eye on it. And yeah, happy to offer our services and help out, on development sides and whatever else we need to do. So Boris, maybe we can collaborate on that a little bit.
Awesome. Sure. Ping me. I'm on Discord at 0.
Very cool.
Yep.
Yeah, and and if you're developers and interested in grant funding too, the DeWi is always interested in more and more, helping get people involved in the ecosystem. So don't be shy.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ben, thank you for tabling this. I think that's one of our first agenda items as questions. Boris fielded it beautifully, so I'd like to thank you, Boris, and thank you, Ben and Abai. Up next on the agenda that I'm not screen sharing currently, but imagine there's a list next to me, is Sophie from the MOC, the Manufacturing Oversight Committee, to give us a quick update about what's going on over there. Second time's a charm. Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'll make this really fast. We had a town hall that we opened up to the community in about 3 weeks ago. Those town hall questions have been answered, and I believe they're being posted today. If they've already been posted, we'll put a link in this chat. Otherwise, you'll see them on Discord in another announcement. We have been pretty quickly working through new manufacturers for full hotspots. Just as we reach a rhythm, we're getting used to light hotspots, which we're opening up today to vendors to audit. And I think the final thing is Codex onboarding is still moving along. We have now moved into a phase where we will decide, the MOC will decide the fate of orders over 20 units case by case. And Jeremy's leading that, so I actually can't field any questions about Codex. Direct those on Discord. But any other questions about the mock? I think we probably have, like, we could take one question if there are any. Okay, moving on. Thanks, Jamie.
Nailed it. Thank you very much, Sophie. Gary, did you have a question?
Gary, yes, I have the next point about LoRaWAN quality.
Rock and roll. Well, your timing is fantastic. Gary, LoRaWAN network quality, please tell us more.
Okay, so I have a third-party sensor that works perfectly on the Things network. However, on Helium, there's two main problems. One, that it uses confirmed uplinks and the ACK fails on the first attempts nearly every time, but nearly always succeeds the second time. And this causes the uplink to happen twice, which doubles battery consumption. The ADR, adaptive data rate, also doesn't work. So that's the second point. And my device is on my desk, my antenna is on my roof, but it's still using the highest battery consumption SF12 for many hours after joining, when it should be on SF7. On TTN, it goes to SF7 within a few uplinks and stays there. But on Helium, nothing changes for many links and it wanders up and down later on. So I can't change the source code of the node, there's no LoRaWAN configuration. SF12 uses 25 times battery consumption of SF7. So combined, that's 50 times more battery consumption than necessary, which makes Helium totally unacceptable as a LoRaWAN network for us and probably others. I'm trying to develop a product on Helium. So basically, while the crypto side has obviously delivered incredible growth, I'm disappointed that Helium is performing so poorly as a LoRaWAN network, which is its intended purpose and is what gives the crypto side its value. And I'm also puzzled why so few are talking about this and why there's not more engineering resources applied to it. So I'm happy to give more background. I know it's pretty deeply technical.
Please, please. This is a technical call, and that was a complex question that I think you explained beautifully. In case there's a,
I'll just
anybody.
share my
Fantastic.
screen. So this is what I see when it's just joined. You can see there. This is the console, and you see it's joined where you see that little red dot, and then at the first uplink always succeeds no problem, just once. But then forever after that, I get these double blue balloons. So every uplink, it's the same data is being sent twice with the same count on it. So there's a 1 there twice in the blue. Now, much later in time, I see this kind of a thing where you've got, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10, 10, and they're 3 seconds apart. The duplicates are 3 seconds apart. It seems to succeed the second time and doesn't try again. And then 5 minutes later, it goes on to 11 and it does that twice. And 5 minutes later, it does 12 twice, etc., etc. When you look at now this is the most interesting thing. When you look at the spreadsheet here, this is the time between events, which there is 5 minutes. The hold time is exactly correlated with success and failure. When the hold time is high, like near 2000, it fails. When it's around 500, it succeeds. And this repeats all the way down. It goes 2,500, 2,500. Actually, it's in reverse time order. But, if it can succeed half the time, why doesn't it succeed the other time? There's something very strange going on. There needs to be more investigation, more testing with real devices for this to be a useful LoRaWAN network.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, my name's Dell, and I'm responsible for the kind of usage side. Just curious, are you based in Australia?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, so that we've seen there's some issues with latency because the LNS is actually based in the US. Having said that, if you haven't already, please file an issue on GitHub, and I can include the link here, and we'll definitely set to investigate that. But this is something that we have seen for countries that are outside of the US, and there is an issue related to the latency getting back to the LNS. But we definitely would want to investigate this. But I can tell you that the experience that we get from users, say in the US, is not what you are sharing. So thank you for raising it. Again, the best way to kind of track this and make sure that we take care of it is I'm gonna put the link in. If you haven't already, I'm gonna put the link in.
I have already lodged a few issues on the GitHub for the router. 517 is the most recent one.
Okay.
However, there's two things I want to say to that about Australia. Firstly, it would be fantastic if you put servers across the world, including Australia. TTN only has a few different locations, but Australia is one of them, perhaps for this reason. Secondly, if that is the real problem, why is it able to join every time and also uplink the first time every time, but not then on? And why? Okay, no, it does. It always fails the first time. No, start again. Okay, from the join works, no problem. The first uplink, no problem. The second uplink, it does twice. The first time it fails, the second time it succeeds. And that, why is the latency not a problem the second time, but always a problem the first time it tries to send an uplink?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that you mentioned. One is, why don't we put servers in Australia, for example, right? So we are a decentralized network, and we, as a company, we don't want to put out a bunch of servers around the world. We actually want the community to do that, because if Helium was to go away, then all these servers go down. It's not great. So we are encouraging members of the community to set up their own LoRaWAN network servers, and many members have. That's one. The second one is, again, I don't know the specifics of what you were describing. I'm
Can
not.
I respond to that though?
Sure.
You are running servers.
Yes.
I'm only suggesting that you change the region of some of those servers.
Well, then the regions that we would change to, then the other folks that are currently in those regions would say, well, why are you changing regions? Why are you just keeping servers here, right? So you can't.
Well, you need to add servers as the network grows. So surely you can move them around.
That's what we're saying. It's kind of similar to the way that the hotspots have evolved. So initially, Helium created hotspots because we had to bootstrap the network, but that wasn't scalable. And so once we started getting additional manufacturers on board, then you could actually scale up the network. And it's the same with the LNS and the servers that we're hosting. Yes, we're hosting, we had to bootstrap the network, but in order for the network to really scale and to become truly decentralized, community members and entrepreneurs are starting to host their own servers. And that's what we want.
Yeah, to just echo this idea, a lot of the mission of the DeWi is to help cede responsibility and control away from Helium Inc. over time. So this is the kind of exactly the kind of stuff that I think would make for a great grant too. I'm not deeply familiar with how much work it is to set up an LNS like this, but that seems, if this is a useful thing for the network, it's absolutely the kind of stuff that we would fund.
Well, it is quite a specialized thing to set up, and with the OUI and everything. I would like to see that incentivized with HNTs, just like validators, so that people do it for the whole network, not just for their own special people or purpose.
Yeah. Depending, like, if it can be done as a via grant, like outside of blockchain changes, that's always the fastest.
But you see that I'm just trying to use the network as it's intended, and it's intended for the whole world, not just America.
Yeah, we understand, Gary. So
Yeah.
I think there's
Okay.
a couple good. Yeah, I think there's a couple good takeaways. One is you filed an issue, so the team will take a look at that. And I think there's also, Jamie, maybe an opportunity for, as part of the grant program, if people do want to set up additional LNSs, which I think is a great idea, that they can apply for a grant to do that.
As public LNS.
Strongly encouraged. Yeah. And one of the key themes underlying the vast majority of the DeWi grants that get given out to is creating public goods. You're not funding, private projects. The idea is to really share the wealth and share the knowledge. So Gary, thank you very much. Appreciate you flagging. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's a second part though. If the cross-country latency is the problem, why is it able to succeed every time on the join and on the first?
Gary, as we mentioned, we'll have to take a look at it.
Sorry.
We're not going to solve it on this call.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. It'll take it to the GitHub issue. But Gary, thank you very much for bringing it up too. This is not the first time too that there's been like a very Australia-specific bug report too.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Appreciate it. The last item on the agenda, I don't know if we have Lewis on the call. He's a regular.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, hey, what's up, Lewis?
Hey.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a quick temperature check on your behalf around HIPs 45 and 46, which I've linked in the document that I will screen share again and post in the chat. Really just to field questions on these. I know you presented on these last time, and you and I have talked and kind of followed some of the discussion, and it's been relatively uncontroversial, but I just wanted to leave some space in case anybody in the community had questions or concerns or,
Okay. So do you want me to summarize them at all, or should we just open it up to questions?
You want to get, you want to give us a fast version again?
Yeah, I'll give like a one sentence TLDR of each one.
Yeah,
please. The LoRaWAN frequency plan selection basically defines a way for the DeWi LoRaWAN technical committee to change the channel plan for a specific region. The general outline is that they can make choices, but there's community checks that keep them from unilaterally making changes. And this was actually in particular developed with Australia in mind, but where the decision is contentious, but then there's lots of other changes that are much less contentious that would follow through this plan as well. So that's HIP 45. HIP 46 is basically for the last almost 6 months now, we've been working with other existing networks that existed before Helium, such as Senate and Actility, to enable them to roam on the Helium infrastructure. But until now, our current routing mechanisms didn't really have a mechanism that would allow for NetID routing of a different network. So this says how it happens. This does also pass through the DeWi LoRaWAN Alliance or LoRaWAN Technical Committee, because we need to verify that the routing request is from the actual owner of that NetID, and the NetID has the LoRaWAN Alliance, which DeWi is a member of, basically has a list of who owns which NetID. So we just basically do a KYC step in that committee, in that technical committee. So that's basically those two proposals. Yeah.
It's great. Thank you, Lewis. I'm always impressed by the ability of folks on this call to do a tweet version of highly technical subjects. It's been relatively, like I mentioned, it's been, very uncontroversial, but did anybody on the call have any questions or anything? Otherwise, I think we would kind of move into the merge discussion. Paul raises his hand. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, no, just curious on the net ID one. If we don't have that functionality today, does that mean that Senate and Actility can't roam or can't use the Helium network yet?
No, they are using it, but they're using a pretty gnarly hack that we have called default router. And basically, if a gateway or if a miner sees a packet and they don't know who to route it to, which would be all these net IDs, there's these hard-coded default routers in the code, and they'll just offer it out to those endpoints. So that's been like written into the miner. You'll see if you go like Control F default _ router in the miner code base, you'll see that mechanism. So it's definitely a bit of a hack. It's not great because we're effectively like spamming these points with a bunch of offers, and it's also not that great because if you don't want to roam via those OUI operators, and as Dow was mentioning earlier, like all of the people running an LNS or running a packet purchaser on the network, like Helium Inc. should not have a special place in that. And so that's an effort to make it so that like if they want to do the routing themselves, if they want to offer another company the ability to buy packets on their behalf, then Helium Inc., we need to make sure that mechanism exists. So that's a big point of that net ID routing change.
Cool.
Well, if there's no other questions, these ones feel on the fast track towards approval because Lewis will probably write the code, which is the hard part. So thanks, Lewis. That's great. We're slightly early on time. I'm going to perhaps foolishly open up the floor for one additional topic before we wrap it up prior, in case anybody has a general question, commentary, or a follow-up from a previous presentation they would like to present. Joey is the first one to raise his hand, so he gets the slot.
Mine's a quick follow-up to Lewis's topic. I'm just kind of curious if we're seeing data packet transfer from those roaming partners on the network yet, or if that switch has been turned on.
Yeah. Let me see. If you're interested, I can tell you I can give you the pub key of the roaming routers, and then you'll see what kind of traffic they're doing. And so those state channels that you see opening and closing on those pub keys would be corresponding to roaming. And I have them handy here, so I'm just going to drop them into the chat.
And Joey, I already made a chart in the DeWi ETL called packet forwarding router, where you can see the comparison of how much is coming through the packet forwarding router versus all the other routers.
Awesome.
DeWi. So
DeWi ETL was where I was driving with those keys, so I'll check that out.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if it's public. I sometimes have a little trouble with permissions in there and trying to figure out how exactly to make something public. Do I just move it from my personal collection to one of the public collections and that makes it public, or?
That's the easiest way. And then Armand, I'll give you the power user permission so you can use the sharing feature. That's kind of annoying.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, I'll move this out of my personal collection for now, and then I'll say something in chat when that's done.
Perfect. Yeah, we have
Cool.
the data analytics channel. And Armand, thank you for your data service. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Great. That was a fantastic last question. So honestly, I'd just like to leave it there on a high note and welcome you all to continue posting some of your news announcements / questions in the document as suggestions or in the Helium Improvement Proposals channel or the DeWi channel. And stay tuned for our meeting next month. I need to check the schedule because if that overlaps with Christmas, we'll probably try to do the same shift it back a week thing, but I will give more advance notice. I apologize in advance. I know it's, last Wednesday of the month is really catchy and really easy to kind of, I'm always like, oh my gosh, the last Wednesday of the month is coming up. It's time for the DeWi meeting. I can't wait. So this one will be might be the first week. It sounded better in my head. So thank you very much for attending. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Christina for taking notes. And thank you, all you lovely people, for attending. And this is the part where you unmute and say goodbye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Adios. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you, Jamie.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiederschauen.
I'm working on it. It's great. Thanks, y'all. Shutting it down.
All right, as we just heard, the meeting is over for HNT. They talked a little bit about the outage and what's going to be coming up, and a couple people answering questions and asking questions about the network. All right.